The alarm hadn't even finished its morning cycle when Dr. Claire Mitchell noticed something wrong outside the medical bay window. A small shape lay crumpled against the exterior wall of the human diplomatic station, barely visible in the dim light of the distant star. Claire pressed her face closer to the reinforced glass, squinting at what appeared to be a bundle of dark scales and torn membrane. Her coffee mug hit the desk with a thud as recognition struck her. That was a living creature out there. A young one. And from the faint wisps of smoke curling from its nostrils, it was a Draconis hatchling. Claire's hands moved to her communicator before her brain could catch up. She stopped herself mid-reach. The station protocols were crystal clear about one thing above all others. Never interfere with Draconis customs. Never touch their young. Never question their ways. The Dragon Empire had ruled half the known galaxy for 3,000 years, and they didn't appreciate outsiders meddling in their affairs. But the hatchling wasn't moving. Claire watched for another 30 seconds, counting her own heartbeats. The small chest rose and fell in shallow, irregular patterns. Steam no longer came from the tiny nostrils. Without thinking further, she grabbed her emergency medical kit and headed for the airlock. The station's artificial gravity gave way to the lighter pull of the docking ring as Claire cycled through the outer doors. Her magnetic boots clanked against the metal plating as she approached the hatchling. Up close, the creature was about the size of a large dog, its scales a deep midnight blue that would have been beautiful if they weren't so dull and cracked. Fever. Claire had seen enough reptilian patients in her xenobiology training to recognize the signs. The hatchling's eyes cracked open as she knelt beside it. They were gold, ancient and knowing despite the youth of the body they inhabited. A weak hiss escaped its throat, more plea than threat. "Easy, little one," Claire whispered, though she knew it probably couldn't understand English. "I'm going to help you." She wrapped the hatchling in her thermal emergency blanket and lifted it carefully. The creature was heavier than it looked, its bones dense like Earth's prehistoric dinosaurs. By the time Claire made it back through the airlock, her arms were shaking and sweat dripped down her back. Commander Eric Stone was waiting in the medical bay when she arrived. His face went pale as he saw what she carried. "Mitchell, what the hell are you doing?" His voice was quiet, controlled, which somehow made it worse than if he'd shouted. "That's a Draconis child." "It's dying," Claire said simply, moving past him to the examination table. She laid the hatchling down gently and immediately began connecting monitoring equipment. The readings made her stomach drop. Core temperature was 43 degrees Celsius and climbing. Respiratory distress. Multiple organ systems beginning to fail. "Claire." Eric stepped closer, his hand on her shoulder. "You know what their traditions say. If a hatchling is sick, it's left to die. It proves it's weak. If we interfere." "Then we interfere," Claire cut him off, already preparing an intravenous line. "I didn't become a doctor to watch children die because of tradition. This could start a war. Then it starts a war." Her hands didn't shake as she inserted the needle into the hatchling's thin foreleg. "But I'm not watching this baby die when I can save it." Eric stood silent for a moment, then sighed and moved to help her. "What do you need?" "Get me the xenobiology database. Every file we have on Draconis physiology." Claire was already mixing a combination of antibiotics and antivirals, adjusting the doses for the hatchling's estimated body weight. "And wake up Dr. Peterson. I need another set of hands." The next 6 hours blurred together in a haze of medical procedures and desperate improvisation. The hatchling's condition worsened before it began to improve. Claire identified the illness as stellar fever, a rare disease that affected reptilian species exposed to certain types of cosmic radiation. It was almost always fatal to young Draconis, according to the limited medical literature available. But Claire had treated something similar once, years ago on Earth. A group of rare lizards at a conservation center had contracted a fever after solar flare exposure. The treatment had been experimental, combining human antivirals with a carefully controlled cooling process. It had worked then. It had to work now. She lowered the hatchling's body temperature degree by degree, monitoring every system. Too fast and the thermal shock would kill it. Too slow and the fever would burn through its organs. Dr. Peterson handled the 4 fluids while Eric monitored the life signs, calling out readings in a steady voice. Temperature dropping. 42.5. Respiratory rate stabilizing. Claire allowed herself a small breath of relief. The hatchling's scales were already looking brighter, the dullness fading. Its breathing became more regular, deeper. After another hour, the golden eyes opened again, this time with more awareness. The hatchling made a sound, something between a chirp and a growl. Claire found herself smiling despite her exhaustion. That's it, little one. You're going to be okay. She wrapped the creature in thermal blankets, the kind used for premature human infants. The hatchling's body temperature needed to stay regulated while its immune system fought off the remaining infection. Claire set up a cot beside the examination table and settled in for the long watch. Eric brought her coffee and a sandwich around midnight, station time. The diplomatic corps is going to lose their minds when they find out. Let them, Claire said, not looking away from her patient. The hatchling had finally fallen into real sleep, not the fever-induced unconsciousness from before. Some things are more important than politics. Ambassador Tornak sent 3 messages today. He's asking why our medical bay is locked down. Tell him we're running contamination protocols. Claire, they're going to find out. The Draconis have sensors everywhere on this station. If they don't know already, they will soon. She knew he was right. But the hatchling's chest was rising and falling in a steady rhythm now. Its scales had regained their luster, that midnight blue now showing hints of purple in certain lights. Whatever happened next, at least she'd given this young life a chance. Claire found herself humming an old lullaby her mother used to sing, something about stars and safe harbors. The hatchling's breathing seemed to synchronize with the melody, deepening into the peaceful rest of healing. She didn't know that this small creature was the youngest son of Emperor Carix the Eternal. She didn't know that by Draconi's law, she'd just committed an act that could be interpreted as either the highest honor or the gravest insult. She didn't know that in 18 hours, the most powerful being in half the galaxy would be standing in this very room demanding answers. All Claire knew was that a child had been dying and now it wasn't. Everything else would have to sort itself out. She adjusted the blankets around the sleeping hatchling and settled back in her chair, determined to keep watch through the night. Outside the medical bay windows, the stars turned in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the small act of compassion that would soon shake the foundations of galactic politics. The hatchling dreamed whatever dragons dream, safe and warm for the first time since fever had claimed it. Anne Claire Mitchell, doctor and xenobiologist, simply refused to let death win without a fight. That was the human way after all. The entire station shook when Emperor Carix's warship docked. Claire felt the vibration through the floor of the medical bay, strong enough to rattle the equipment on the shelves. She looked up from the hatchling, who was now awake and watching her with curious golden eyes. Over the past 18 hours, the little dragon had improved dramatically. The fever had broken. The breathing was clear. Claire had even managed to get some liquid nutrients into its system. Commander Eric burst through the door, his face flushed. Claire, you need to hide that hatchling. No. The Emperor is here. Claire's hand instinctively moved to rest on the hatchling's back. The scales were warm under her palm but no longer burning with fever. I'm not hiding a patient, Eric. You don't understand. He brought a battle fleet. 12 warships are in orbit right now. Ambassador Tornax is with him, and he looks like he's ready to watch this entire station burn. Then they can burn it, Claire said quietly. I'm not abandoning this child. Eric started to argue but was cut off by the sound of heavy footsteps in the corridor outside. The medical bay doors slid open with a hiss. Ambassador Tornax entered first, his reptilian features twisted in what might have been satisfaction or contempt. His scales were deep red, almost crimson, and his eyes gleamed with anticipation. There, Tornax said, gesturing toward Claire and the examination table. The human interfered with our sacred traditions. The evidence is clear. Behind him came Emperor Carix the Eternal. Claire had seen pictures of the Draconis Emperor in history files and diplomatic briefings, but nothing prepared her for the reality of his presence. He was massive, easily 3 meters tall even in his semi-upright stance. His scales were black as deep space, edged with lines of gold that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Ancient scars crisscrossed his chest and arms, each one a story of conquest and survival. His eyes were like molten gold, burning with an intensity that made Claire's breath catch in her throat. Those eyes were filled with rage. Carix's gaze swept the room and locked onto the examination table. For a moment the Emperor stood completely still. Then he moved forward with shocking speed, crossing the medical bay in 3 long strides. His clawed hand reached for the thermal blankets. Don't, Claire said, stepping between the Emperor and the table. Her voice shook but her body didn't move. He's still recovering. Any stress could cause a relapse. The Emperor's head swiveled to stare down at her. Up close, Claire could see the tiny details of his scales, the way they overlapped like armor plating. She could smell something like heated stone and ancient smoke. You dare stand between me and my son? Carix's voice was deep, resonant, like rocks grinding together in an avalanche. You dare touch what was meant to die? I dare save a child's life, Claire said. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she held her ground. That's what doctors do. Ambassador Tornax moved closer, his expression eager. Your Majesty, this is the insult we spoke of. The human has violated the sacred tradition of selection. She has interfered with the natural order that has made the Draconis strong for 3,000 years. Carix's eyes never left Claire's face. Move aside, human. No. The single word hung in the air. Commander Eric made a small sound of distress behind her. She heard other station personnel gathering in the corridor, though none of them entered. They were all waiting to see if the Emperor would simply kill her where she stood. Instead, Carix reached past her. His massive clawed hand, each talon as long as Claire's forearm, gently pulled back the thermal blankets. The hatchling looked up at his father and made a soft chirping sound. The Emperor froze. Silthar. The name came out as barely a whisper, so different from the commanding voice of moments before. The hatchling, Silthar, chirped again and tried to lift his head. Claire immediately moved to support him, adjusting the blankets and checking his vital signs on the monitor. Careful. He's doing much better, but he's still weak. The stellar fever damaged his respiratory system. He needs at least another 3 days of treatment before. Stellar fever? Carix's voice sharpened. You cured stellar fever? Not cured. Treated. The prognosis is good, but nothing survives stellar fever. The Emperor's eyes moved to the monitoring equipment, scanning the readouts with surprising understanding. Especially not hatchlings. It burns them from the inside. Their organs fail. They die in agony within 2 days. Human medical techniques are different, Claire said. She pulled up the treatment charts on her datapad and held it out, though she had no idea if the Emperor could read human medical notation. We don't accept that some diseases are automatically fatal. We fight them. Carix took the datapad in his claws, his movements careful despite their size. He studied the information for a long moment. When he looked up, the rage in his eyes had transformed into something else. Confusion. Perhaps even something like wonder. Why? The question was simple but carried enormous weight. He was weak. Sick. According to the laws of nature and tradition, he should die so that strong hatchlings survive. This is how the Draconis became powerful. Why would you save weakness? Claire met his golden gaze steadily. Because he's not weak. He's sick. There's a difference. Explain. It was a command, but without the earlier fury behind it. Claire took a breath and tried to put her thoughts into words. On Earth, humans are born more helpless than almost any other species. We can't walk for months. We can't feed ourselves. We can't survive alone. By your logic, every human child should die. But we don't see that as weakness. We see it as a stage of development. We protect our young. We heal them when they're sick. And because of that, we've survived and spread across space. She gestured to the hatchling, who had closed his eyes again but was breathing steadily. Your son got sick. That doesn't mean his mind is weak or his heart is flawed. It means he encountered a disease. With treatment, he'll be fine. Maybe even stronger than before, because his immune system will remember this and fight better next time. Carix's claws tightened on the datapad. You speak of things that go against 3,000 years of tradition. I speak of medicine, Claire said simply. I speak of not giving up on children just because they face challenges. Ambassador Tornax stepped forward, his voice sharp. Your Majesty, this human has undermined our sacred ways. She must be punished as an example. The treaty? Be silent, Tornax. The Emperor's voice was quiet but absolute. The ambassador stepped back as if struck. Carix moved closer to the examination table. His massive hand reached out, and with surprising gentleness, touched the top of Silthar's head. The hatchling made a contented sound and nuzzled against his father's palm. I left him to die, the Emperor said, so softly that Claire almost didn't hear it. It is tradition. It is law. A sick hatchling proves the bloodline is flawed. I have 17 other children. I should not care about one weak link. He looked at Claire and she saw something break behind his eyes. But I do care. I have cared since the moment I had to leave him on that cold station wall. I told myself it was necessary. That it was right. That it was the Draconis' way. His voice grew rough. And yet a human stranger cared more for my son's life than I was allowed to show. Claire felt her throat tighten. You're here now. That's what matters. The Emperor stared at her for a long moment, then at his son, then back at her. You risked war. You risked your life. You violated every diplomatic protocol. For a child you didn't know. A child of a species that would have killed you without hesitation. Yes. Why? Claire smiled softly, reaching out to adjust Silther's blankets. Because that's what humans do. We don't leave children to die. Not if there's even the smallest chance to save them. Some things are more important than tradition or politics or even survival. Some things are just right. Emperor Carix, the eternal ruler of half the galaxy, conqueror of 1,000 worlds, stood silent in a human medical bay. He watched his supposedly worthless son sleep peacefully under the care of a species he had always considered weak and sentimental. And for the first time in his long life, he began to wonder if strength had more than one definition. The medical bay fell into an uneasy silence after Claire's words. Emperor Carix remained standing beside the examination table, his massive form casting shadows across the small room. His golden eyes stayed fixed on his sleeping son, watching the steady rise and fall of the hatchling's chest. Ambassador Tornax shifted uncomfortably near the door, clearly expecting violence that hadn't come. Claire moved to check Silther's vital signs again, her hand steady despite the tension in the air. The monitors showed continued improvement. Heart rate normal. Temperature stable. Oxygen levels good. She made notes on her data pad, very aware of the Emperor watching her every movement. "Show me," Carix said suddenly. Claire looked up. "Show you what, Your Majesty? You spoke of Earth's history. Of fighting diseases that should have killed you. Show me proof of these words." Claire hesitated only a moment before pulling up her medical database. She projected the files onto the wall screen, images and data filling the space with soft blue light. This is the history of human medicine. It's not always pretty, but it's honest. The first images showed ancient Earth, humans suffering from diseases that had killed millions. Plague, smallpox, polio. The pictures were difficult to look at, bodies twisted by illness, children crying in pain. "We were weak once," Claire said quietly. "These diseases should have destroyed us according to natural selection. Humans who caught these illnesses had little chance of survival. But we didn't accept that." She moved to the next series of images. Primitive hospitals. Early vaccines. Scientists working by candlelight over microscopes. We studied the diseases. We learned how they worked. We made medicines. Some humans died trying to cure others. Some spent their entire lives fighting one disease. Carix's head tilted slightly, his only sign of interest. And did they succeed? Yes. Claire brought up charts showing disease rates plummeting over centuries. Smallpox killed over 300 million humans in the 20th century alone. Now it's completely gone. We destroyed it. Polio crippled children by the thousands. Now it's almost extinct. Plague, cholera, tuberculosis, all these killers that were once death sentences, we learned to cure. She pulled up images of modern hospitals, premature babies in incubators, children in wheelchairs, elderly humans using machines to help them breathe. And we didn't stop with diseases. Humans are born too early sometimes. We created machines to help them survive outside the womb. Humans lose the ability to walk. We build devices to help them move. Humans' organs fail. We replace them with artificial ones or transplant them from donors. Ambassador Tornax made a disgusted sound. "This is exactly the weakness that will doom your species. You waste resources keeping alive those who should naturally die. You weaken your genetic line with each generation of saved defectives." Claire turned to face him, her expression hardening. "Is that what you think? That saving lives makes us weak?" "It is obvious," Tornax said with a dismissive wave. "The Draconis Empire is strong because only the strong survive. Your Earth would be more powerful if you let nature take its course. Then explain why humans now live across 200 star systems while the Draconis, for all your strength, control only half that." Claire's voice was calm but firm. "Explain why human technology advances faster than any other species. Explain why human colonies survive in conditions that kill other races." She pulled up more images. Human settlements on frozen moons. Underwater cities. Stations orbiting black holes. We survive because we don't abandon each other. A human who loses their legs in an accident doesn't die. They get prosthetics and keep working. A human born with a weak heart doesn't get left to die. They get surgery and go on to become scientists or artists or leaders. Claire moved back to the examination table, her hand resting protectively near Silther. "That child you would have left to die might grow up to be the greatest engineer in your empire. Or a brilliant strategist. Or a poet who inspires millions. You'll never know because you were willing to throw away his potential over a treatable illness. Humans see strength differently than you do," she continued. "We think strength is protecting those who can't protect themselves. Strength is fighting for every life even when it's hard. Strength is choosing compassion when cruelty would be easier. Carax finally spoke, his voice thoughtful. Yet you must have limits. Surely you don't save everyone. We try, Claire said simply. We don't always succeed. Medicine has limits. Sometimes we lose patients despite everything we do. But we never stop trying because someone is considered weak or worthless. Every life has value. She pulled up one more image, a famous photograph from Earth's history. It showed a doctor, exhausted and covered in sweat, slumped against a wall after a 30-hour surgery. The patient, a young girl who had been born with a severe heart defect, survived. This doctor could have told the parents their daughter was too weak to survive, that it was nature's way. Instead, he spent 30 hours replacing her heart with one from a donor. That girl grew up to become one of Earth's most important medical researchers. She developed the cure for neural decay that saved millions across the galaxy. Claire looked directly at the Emperor. If we had followed your philosophy, all those millions would have died. Because we would have given up on one sick child. The medical bay doors suddenly hissed open. Commander Eric Stone entered, followed by 3 armed security personnel. He stopped short when he saw the scene. The Emperor standing calmly by the examination table. Claire beside him, clearly unhurt. Ambassador Tornax looking furious but controlled. Commander, Eric said carefully, his hand near his weapon. Is everything all right? Claire nodded. Everything's fine, Eric. The Emperor and I are just having a discussion about medical philosophy. Eric's eyes moved between Claire and Carax, clearly trying to assess the situation. He'd expected to find Claire in danger, possibly the Emperor threatening her or worse. Instead, the massive dragon ruler was staring at the wall screen, studying images of human medical history with what looked like genuine interest. I received reports that the Emperor's warships were powering weapons, Eric said slowly. I came to provide protection. Your protection would be meaningless against my fleet, Carax said without taking his eyes from the screen. If I wished this human dead, she would be dead. Your weapons could not stop me. Maybe not, Eric said, moving to stand beside Claire anyway. But we'd die trying to protect her. That's also the human way. For the first time, Carax looked at the commander directly. His golden eyes studied Eric with new interest. You would sacrifice yourself for one doctor? Without hesitation, Eric said firmly. Claire is part of our crew. Our family. We protect our own. Even though she violated diplomatic protocols and potentially started a war? Especially because of that, Eric said. She did what was right regardless of the consequences. That takes real courage. Carax was silent for a long moment. Then he looked back at the sleeping Silther, something unreadable crossing his reptilian features. Courage. That word means different things to different species, I am learning. He turned back to Claire. The Draconis measure courage by willingness to face death in battle. To fight impossible odds. To conquer or die trying. And what would you call what this human did? The Emperor asked quietly. She knew touching my son could mean her death. Could mean war. Could mean the destruction of this entire station. Yet she did it anyway, not for glory or conquest, but to save a life she owed nothing to. Ambassador Tornax started to speak, but Carax silenced him with a raised hand. Is that not also courage? The Emperor continued. Perhaps a form of courage my people have forgotten. Claire watched something shift in the Emperor's expression. The anger was completely gone now, replaced by something she couldn't quite identify. Confusion. Wonder. Perhaps even the beginning of understanding. Silther stirred in his sleep, making a small sound. Carax's massive hand reached out again, touching his son with a gentleness that seemed impossible for such a powerful creature. The hatchling's breathing deepened, settling back into peaceful rest. Tell me more, Carax said, still watching his son. Tell me how many lives human medicine has saved through this philosophy of yours. Claire pulled up more files, more data, more stories. And the Emperor of half the galaxy stood in a small medical bay on a neutral station, learning that perhaps strength and weakness were not as simple as 3,000 years of tradition had taught him. Emperor Carax did not leave the station. His warships remained in orbit, a constant reminder of his power, but the Emperor himself stayed in the medical bay. He watched. He observed. He learned things that challenged everything he thought he knew about strength and survival. On the second day, Claire arrived for her morning shift to find the Emperor sitting in the chair beside Silther's bed. The massive dragon looked uncomfortable in the human-sized furniture, but he hadn't moved all night. His golden eyes tracked every beep of the monitors, every rise and fall of his son's chest. Good morning, Your Majesty, Claire said softly, not wanting to wake the hatchling. Did you sleep at all? Draconis require less sleep than humans, Carrick replied. I have been thinking. About what? About how many sons and daughters I have lost. His voice was quiet, heavy with something that might have been regret. 17 children survived to adulthood. But there were 43 eggs. I never questioned what happened to the others. It was simply the way of things. Claire checked Silther's vital signs, giving the Emperor time with his thoughts. The hatchling was doing remarkably well. The fever was completely gone. His breathing was strong. In another day or two he could probably leave the medical bay. Your Majesty, she said carefully, not all of those hatchlings would have survived even with treatment. Some conditions are beyond current medicine. But many could have been saved with proper care. How many? Carrick's claws dug slightly into the armrests of the chair. How many of my children died because I followed tradition instead of fighting for them? Claire didn't have an answer for that. The door opened and Dr. Peterson entered, carrying a tray of food for Silther. She stopped when she saw the Emperor, clearly not expecting him to still be there. Oh, I brought breakfast for the little one. He's been eating better each day. Show me, Carrick commanded. Dr. Peterson glanced at Claire, who nodded encouragingly. The doctor approached the examination table and gently woke Silther. The hatchling's eyes opened, brighter now than they had been days ago. He chirped happily when he saw the food. We've been giving him a mixture of proteins and nutrients, Peterson explained, offering small pieces to Silther. He needs to rebuild his strength slowly. Too much too fast would upset his system. The Emperor watched as his son ate eagerly, making happy sounds between bites. He seems content. Children usually are when they feel safe and cared for, Peterson said with a smile. She stroked Silther's head gently. He's a brave little fellow. Took his medicine without fussing once he understood we were trying to help. Over the next hour, more medical staff came and went. Each one stopped to check on Silther, to offer words of encouragement, to adjust his blankets or bring new toys to keep him entertained. Engineer Martinez brought a small holographic projector that displayed swimming fish. Silther watched them with fascination, trying to catch the light with his claws. Lieutenant Park stopped by with a stuffed animal, something soft and blue that she'd replicated in the station's fabricator. I thought he might like something to cuddle, she said shyly. Silther immediately clutched the toy to his chest, purring. Carrick observed it all in silence. Human after human came to visit a child that wasn't their species, wasn't their responsibility, wasn't their concern by any logical measure. Yet each one cared. Each one invested time and emotion into the recovery of one small dragon. Commander Eric arrived during lunch with a report data pad. Your Majesty, Ambassador Tornax has requested an audience. He says it's urgent. Let him wait, Carrick said, not taking his eyes off Silther, who was now playing with the holographic fish while Claire changed his bandages. He's been waiting for 3 hours, sir. Then he can wait 3 more. The Emperor's tone left no room for argument. Eric nodded and left. Carrick turned to Claire. Your crew. They all care about my son. Of course they do, Claire said simply. He's a child who was sick. Now he's getting better. That makes everyone happy. But he's not human. He's not even a mammal. His species has conquered your colonies, killed your people in border conflicts, and treated humans as inferior for centuries. Carrick's voice was genuinely puzzled. Why do you care? Claire finished the bandage and helped Silther settle back against his pillows. Because none of that is his fault. He's just a child. He didn't choose his species or his father's empire. He's innocent. And he deserves a chance at life just like any other child. This makes no strategic sense. Not everything is about strategy, Your Majesty. Claire sat down, suddenly tired. Sometimes things are about being decent. About doing what's right because it's right, not because it benefits us. Carrick was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I had a daughter once. My second egg. She hatched weak, smaller than the others. By tradition I should have left her exposed. But she looked at me with these bright green eyes and I hesitated. For 3 days I hesitated, keeping her hidden, trying to decide if I should break tradition. What happened? Claire asked softly. My father found her. He was emperor before me. He took her from my arms and left her in the desert himself. He said I was being weak. That sentiment would make me a poor ruler. Carrick's voice was hollow. I never even named her. She was dead within hours. I'm sorry, Claire said and meant it. I told myself he was right. That it was necessary. I became emperor and I followed the same traditions, Left my own weak hatchlings to die because that was the Draconis' way. He looked at Claire with ancient, tired eyes. But I remember her. I remember all of them. And I wonder what they might have become. The medical bay doors burst open. Ambassador Tornax strode in, his red scales bright with agitation. Your Majesty, this has gone on long enough. You've been here for 3 days. The Council demands your return. They question why you waste time watching humans coddle weakness. Carrick slowly stood to his full height. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. You dare question me, Tornax? I dare speak truth as is my duty as your advisor, Tornax said, though his voice wavered slightly. This human philosophy is poison. It makes us question traditions that have kept the Draconis strong for 3,000 years. We must reject it before it spreads. Before it spreads, Carrick repeated slowly. Tell me, Ambassador, how many hatchlings has your family lost to illness over the generations? Tornax blinked. That is not relevant. How many? The Emperor's voice was sharp as broken glass. 7, Tornax admitted reluctantly. But they were weak. Their loss strengthened the bloodline. Did it? Carrick moved toward him. Or did we lose 7 potential scholars, warriors, engineers, leaders? 7 minds that might have advanced our empire, wasted because we were too proud to admit that illness is not the same as weakness. Your Majesty, you cannot seriously be considering. I am considering many things. Carrick cut him off. I am considering that humans, who we thought weak and sentimental, now control more systems than we do. I am considering that their technology advances while ours stagnates. I am considering that they achieve this by refusing to waste potential. He turned back to where Silthar was playing with his toy, completely unaware of the political storm happening around him. That hatchling should be dead. By our traditions, his death would have been right and proper. But look at him now, growing stronger each day. And I cannot help but think of all the other sons and daughters who could have grown strong if only we had tried to save them. This is madness, Tornax hissed. The Council will never accept human methods. They will see it as abandoning our heritage. Then the Council needs to learn that heritage built on wasted lives is no heritage at all. Carrick's voice rang with imperial authority. Summon the finest Draconis physicians to this station. Dr. Mitchell will teach them her methods. We will learn how to save our young instead of abandoning them. The medical bay went completely silent. Claire stared at the Emperor, shocked. Commander Eric's mouth hung open. Even Tornax seemed too stunned to speak for a moment. Your Majesty, Tornax finally managed, if you do this you will change Draconis society forever. The traditionalists will revolt. The military commanders will question your strength. This could tear the Empire apart. Good, Carrick said firmly. Let it tear apart if it must. An empire that throws away its children's lives for the sake of tradition is an empire that deserves to fall. We will build something better in its place. He moved back to Silthar's bedside and touched his son's head gently. The hatchling looked up and chirped happily, completely trusting. Dr. Mitchell, will you teach my physicians your methods? Claire found her voice after a moment. Yes, Your Majesty. Of course I will. Then we have an accord. Carrick straightened, and suddenly he was every bit the Emperor again, commanding and absolute. Prepare whatever you need. I will send for the medical council. And Ambassador Tornax. Yes, Your Majesty? Inform the Galactic Assembly that the Draconis Empire wishes to form a formal alliance with humanity for the purpose of medical knowledge exchange. Make it clear that any species that interferes will answer to me personally. Tornax looked like he wanted to argue further, but one look at the Emperor's face silenced him. He bowed stiffly and left the medical bay, his tail lashing in agitation. Commander Eric let out a breath he'd been holding. Your Majesty, you just proposed the most significant diplomatic development in 300 years. I know, Carrick said. And it all started because one human doctor refused to let a child die. Perhaps that is the true meaning of strength. The Grand Council chamber on the Draconis' home world had never seen anything like this. Representatives from 47 different species filled the tiered seating, all watching with a mixture of curiosity and concern. The Emperor had called an emergency session of the Galactic Assembly, something that hadn't happened in over a century. Rumors had spread across known space like wildfire. Some said the Draconis were declaring war on humanity. Others whispered that the Emperor had gone mad. Claire stood in a small waiting room off the main chamber, trying to calm her nerves. Commander Eric stood beside her, dressed in his formal military uniform. They'd been transported to the Draconis' home world on the Emperor's personal flagship, treated with honors usually reserved for heads of state. It had been 3 weeks since Silther first arrived at the medical bay, and Claire still wasn't entirely sure what was happening. "You think he'll really go through with it?" Eric asked quietly. "I don't know," Claire admitted. "Changing 3,000 years of tradition is no small thing. There's been resistance." That was an understatement. The Draconis Council had been in chaos for weeks. Traditional faction leaders called the Emperor's proposal an insult to their ancestors. Military commanders worried it would make the Empire look weak. But Carax had been unmovable. He'd spent those 3 weeks bringing every sick hatchling in the Empire to human medical facilities. 17 had been saved so far. 17 lives that would have been lost to tradition. The door opened and a Draconis guard entered, his scales a deep bronze. "Dr. Mitchell, Commander Stone, the Emperor requests your presence." They followed him through corridors of polished stone, carved with 3,000 years of imperial history. Battle victories. Conquest. The names of emperors stretching back to the founding of the dynasty. Claire wondered if after today those walls would tell a different kind of story. The Grand Council chamber was massive, easily large enough to hold 1,000 beings. The ceiling rose 50 meters overhead, supported by columns carved to look like ancient dragons. At the far end sat the assembled Galactic Council, representatives from every major species in known space. The humans had sent Ambassador Williams, a stern woman who looked deeply uncomfortable with the attention. In the center of the floor stood Emperor Carax. And in his arms, looking tiny against his massive frame, was Silther. The hatchling had made a complete recovery. His scales gleamed with health, that midnight blue now showing hints of the gold edging that marked imperial bloodline. He looked around the chamber with bright curious eyes, completely unafraid of the hundreds of beings staring at him. Carax's voice boomed through the chamber, amplified by ancient acoustics. "I have called this council to witness a change in Draconis law and custom. A change that will affect not just my empire, but potentially the entire galaxy." Murmurs rippled through the audience. The Draconis representatives looked tense. Many had opposed this moment. "3 weeks ago my youngest son was dying," Carax continued. "He had contracted stellar fever, a disease that has killed countless Draconis young throughout our history. By our ancient traditions, by the laws that have governed our people since the beginning, he should have been left to die. Weakness, we believed, must be eliminated so that only the strong survive." The Emperor's eyes swept across the chamber. "I followed that tradition. I left my son on a cold station wall to die alone. And I told myself it was right. It was necessary. It was the Draconis' way." He adjusted his hold on Silther, who chirped softly and nestled against his father's chest. But a human doctor found him. Dr. Claire Mitchell, who stands here today, did something that goes against every strategic interest her species should have. She saved the child of an empire that has been an enemy to humanity for generations. She risked war. She risked her life. She did it because, as she told me, it was simply the right thing to do. Carax gestured and Claire was guided forward to stand beside him. She felt every eye in the chamber on her, felt the weight of history pressing down. Silther saw her and made happy chirping sounds, reaching out with his small claws. Claire couldn't help but smile and gently touch his head. "This human taught me something that 3,000 years of tradition had made me forget," the Emperor said. "She taught me that true strength is not found in letting the weak die. True strength is found in protecting those who cannot protect themselves. In fighting for every life no matter how difficult. In choosing compassion when cruelty would be easier." Ambassador Tornax stood from his seat among the Draconis delegation. "Your Majesty, with respect, you speak of abandoning the very principles that made the Draconis Empire strong. Our ancestors were wrong," Carax's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. "And I was wrong to follow them blindly." The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Draconis representatives argued among themselves. Other species watched with fascination. This was unprecedented. The Emperor of the Draconis, admitting error, rejecting tradition. Carax waited for silence, then continued. "I have spent these past weeks investigating our records. Do you know how many hatchlings the imperial family alone has lost to illness over the past 1,000 years? 743. 743 potential emperors, generals, scientists, artists, leaders. All lost because we called illness weakness and refused to fight it." He held Silther higher so the entire chamber could see him. "This child should be dead. By our traditions his death would have been right and proper. But look at him now. Healthy. Strong. Growing more each day. And I am forced to ask myself, how many of those 743 could have been saved? How many brilliant minds did we waste for the sake of tradition? A Draconis elder stood, his scales white with age. Your Majesty, even if what you say is true, changing our ways now would dishonor all those who died under the old traditions. Their deaths would have been meaningless. No, Claire spoke up, surprised by her own voice. The Emperor nodded at her to continue. With respect, sir, their deaths were already meaningless. They died because of a tradition that mistook illness for weakness. Honoring them doesn't mean continuing that mistake. It means learning from it and making sure no more children die needlessly. The elder stared at her for a long moment, then slowly sat down. He didn't look convinced, but he didn't argue further. Carax set Silther down carefully on the floor. The hatchling immediately went to Claire, wrapping himself around her legs with happy chirps. The Emperor watched them for a moment, something soft in his expression, before turning back to the council. I hereby abolish the tradition of exposure, he declared, his voice ringing with imperial authority. From this day forward, no Draconis hatchling will be left to die due to illness or injury. We will fight for their lives as humans fight for theirs. Any who violate this decree will answer to me personally. The chamber exploded in reaction. Some Draconis roared approval. Others hissed in anger. Representatives from other species talked urgently among themselves. Carax raised his hand for silence. Furthermore, I am establishing the first Draconis Human Medical Academy. It will be built here on our home world, and will serve as a center for learning and cooperation between our species. Dr. Mitchell will serve as its first director, teaching Draconis physicians the methods that saved my son's life. Claire's eyes went wide. Your Majesty, I'm honored, but I'm just one doctor. I can't. You can and you will, Carax said firmly but not unkindly. You will have whatever resources you need. The finest minds from both our species working together. And you will save lives that would otherwise be lost. He reached up to his neck and removed something Claire hadn't noticed before. A medallion of pure gold, carved with the imperial seal, hung on a chain of platinum. It was beautiful and ancient, glowing with its own inner light. This is the Star of Imperial Honor, Carax said, holding it up. It has been awarded only 17 times in 3,000 years, to those who have performed services of incalculable value to the Draconis people. Dr. Claire Mitchell, for saving not just my son's life, but for teaching my people the true meaning of strength, I name you Friend of the Empire and Honorary Aunt to the Imperial family. He placed the medallion around Claire's neck. It was heavy, warm, and she could feel power humming through it. Silther chirped proudly and nuzzled her leg. The chamber fell silent. Then, slowly, the Draconis delegation began to pound their tails against the floor. It started as scattered thumps but grew into a rhythmic thunder that shook the ancient stones. Other species joined in their own ways. Applause. Cheers. Whistles and calls in a dozen different languages. Ambassador Williams stood, tears on her cheeks. On behalf of humanity, I accept this alliance. We will work together to ensure no child of any species dies when they could be saved. The pounding grew louder. History was being made in this moment and everyone present knew it. The most feared empire in the galaxy was changing its fundamental values because one doctor refused to let a child die. Carax looked at Claire, and she saw genuine gratitude in those ancient golden eyes. You saved more than my son, he said quietly, only loud enough for her to hear. You saved me from becoming like my father. From losing more children to pride and tradition. For that I am eternally grateful. Claire picked up Silther, who purred contentedly in her arms. I just did what any doctor would do, Your Majesty. I fought for a life. And in doing so you changed the galaxy. The ceremony continued for hours. Treaties were signed. Agreements were made. Plans were drawn for the new medical academy. But Claire barely noticed any of it. She sat in a place of honor beside the Emperor's throne, with Silther sleeping peacefully in her lap, and she thought about how sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can reshape entire civilizations. Across the galaxy the news spread at light speed. The Draconis Empire, unchanged for 3,000 years, had transformed overnight. All because a human doctor looked at a dying child and decided that some things were more important than tradition or politics or even survival. Some things were just right. And in medical facilities across known space, doctors of every species looked at their sickest patients with new eyes, inspired by the knowledge that fighting for every life wasn't weakness. It was the truest form of strength. Silther stirred in Claire's arms and looked up at her with sleepy golden eyes. She smiled down at him and whispered, You're going to change the world, little one. Just by living. The hatchling chirped softly and went back to sleep, completely unaware that he'd already changed it.